Hey guys, it's Mr. Hale. I'm coming at you right now just to give you two quick videos. This is going to be in two parts. This is part one. First, I just want to let you know I'm checking in from my magical and mysterious garage of science. I want to let you know that the Hale family is okay. We're doing well. We're healthy, and our mental health is mostly intact at this point. Um, I hope that you are doing well. I've heard from most of you, and most people seem to be doing okay. And I've heard from a few people that are, maybe struggling a little bit. And just want to let you know I think about you, I miss you, and wish I was there in school with you right now. Hope you've had a chance to see some of the other videos that I've shared. We are having a little bit of a struggle making them, but we're also having a lot of fun trying to figure it out. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting more and more of these out as I get a little bit better at them. I don't want to do them just to do them. I want to try to deliver some content and hopefully give you something interesting and mildly entertaining to watch. Um, as far as Google Classroom goes, I'm getting stuff submitted from people. Guys, listen to me. I want you to understand this very clearly. You only need to submit things to me, and the only work you need to be doing is from April 6th forward. Okay. Nothing else matters to me in Google Classroom. So check the classwork tab, follow the classwork tab, focus on those tabs that say weekly e-learning, Mr. Hill's videos, etc. Also, there's the discussion board on there. Don't be afraid to post up a question. I have not seen a single question come up on that yet. So that's a resource that's there for you. Thank you all. I'm getting a ton of work. Almost everybody is doing work, and that's exciting. I'm really happy to see that, and I'm proud of you guys for doing that. Keep it up. It's so important that you stay engaged in school. I'm going to jump right in here, go through a couple things for you. Number one, wind. This is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the atmosphere, wind. And it's funny, you may not think so much that what we've talked about while we were still in session applies to what we're doing now, but it really, really does. All those landforms, the atmosphere, Earth and space, Earth's rotation, all of those things really have a huge effect on how wind is created and what drives our weather patterns. So a couple things I want to go into. First of all, wind, here's what you need to know. Here's the nitty gritty bare bones. If you don't learn anything else, here's what I want you to know. There are two types of winds. There are local winds. Those are winds that blow over small areas or for short periods of time. Then you have global winds that blow for long periods of time, pretty much year round, and they blow across the entire planet. Wind is created by the uneven heating and cooling of the Earth's surface. It is, pretty wild how that works, but, water heats up and cools off quicker than land. So therefore, the temperature of the air directly over the water versus directly over the land is different. That creates a difference of air pressure. And well, when you have those differences in air pressure, that's what causes air to move, is to put it as simple as I can. Move the cursor off my face. That's driving me a little crazy. So, as I said, the temperature differences are what creates the movement of the air that we feel as wind, right? So, long story short, Mother Nature, I'm just going to put this in really basic kid terms. Mother Nature is like all moms. She wants her kids to be treated equally, and she does not like it when things get out of balance. So if there's an area that has higher pressure, which is usually colder or cooler air, versus an area of lower pressure, which tends to be air that's warmer, what happens is in those cooler, more dense areas, the molecules are close together. Those warmer, less dense areas, the molecules tend to spread apart. They're farther apart. So Mother Nature doesn't like that. So what happens is the air moves from areas of high pressure to low pressure. It always does. Always, always, always. Air always moves from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. Make sense? So What happens is an area gets heated up, the air rises. There's an area that's got higher pressure, cooler air nearby. It moves in, and that forces that warm air up. As that warm air rises, guess what happens? It gets away from the warm air, or warm ground rather, and those molecules come back together. They become more dense. They sink back down to the ground, where guess what? They start to get heated up again, and up they go again. Creates a big circle. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it should. It should remind you of convection currents. And just like in the mantle, we learned about inside of the earth that, that mantle material that's closer to the outer core, it heats up, it becomes less dense, and it slowly rises up until it runs into the bottom of the lithosphere, or the top uppermost layer of the mantle, runs into that, and it starts moving over, and slowly it cools down and sinks back down. That big convection current that we talked about. And wind works the same way, even though, unless you live in Los Angeles, air isn't something you can really see very often. So it's kind of hard to imagine with something we can't see with our eyes. Um, but that's really what creates wind. It's as simple as that. We measure wind with a device called an anemometer. I actually ordered one off Amazon, but I don't have it yet. So, but you can look it up, anemometer. It's kind of hard to say and even harder to spell, but it's basically a thing that has a bunch of little cups on it, and it spins around in a circle, and it tells you how fast the wind is moving. I'm sure you've all seen them. The other thing we measure wind with is something called a weather vane, and that is tells us wind direction. And generally, if you go by an airport, you'll see something called a windsock, and it looks like a great big long, usually they're orange or red, and it's kind of cone shaped. You'll see those things blowing, and that'll tell you which direction the wind is coming from. And that's what's really important. If you are thinking about wind, you're watching the weather. If they say, hey, we have a northeaster or a northwesterly wind tonight, well, guess what you can expect? You can expect the temperature to probably to cool off a little bit, because wind is usually named for the direction that it comes from versus the direction it's going. So if they say a northwesterly wind, that means the wind is coming from the northwest. It doesn't mean it's going toward the northwest. That's a very common misconception. I know a few adults that don't even quite always understand that one. So don't feel bad if you get a little confused about it. So I'm going to jump into the whole crux of these two videos, and that is natural resources, renewable versus non-renewable. You're like, well, Mr. Hill, what does that have to do with weather? Well, actually quite a bit. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to bring up this slideshow, and I'm going to present it. Hopefully you can still see me here. So what I want to go back and revisit here a little bit are natural resources. Now, you guys may remember that we did that project where you made the poster where you had to uh, define, different resources. Were they renewable? Were they non-renewable? Those kinds of things for natural resources. There's two main categories, and what we're talking about here are renewable energy sources versus non-renewable. Renewable energy sources, let me slide my cursor over here. Those are things that are made from sources or come from sources that are pretty easily replaced or are replaced over a short period of time. Non-renewable resources are those that are not easily replaced and take many, many millions of years in some cases to create. So examples of renewable resources: wind. We always have wind, right? As long as we have a sun and an atmosphere, we're going to have wind. Hydroelectric power. That's probably my favorite, just because it's super clean. It's always there. You're not reliant upon the weather to create it, and you can control the output. It's pretty neat. Being in Missouri, it's kind of cool because we have two big hydroelectric dams that immediately come to mind, and that is Bagnell Dam at the Lake of the Ozarks, as well as Cannon Dam at Mark Twain Lake. Both of those are pretty cool. If you ever get a chance, if you haven't already done so, please go take a tour of those. It's pretty cool once this is all over, of course. Um, then, of course, solar power. That's another super neat and clean resource that we're getting really good at because every day solar panels are getting better. I was reading an article the other day where they figured out how to use reverse engineer solar panels to get energy from at night, which is kind of cool. So pretty neat stuff. Geothermal, that's when we're using heat from the earth, from the interior of the earth to create things, create energy. And then wind power, that's another super cool one. Now, I'll be honest with you about wind power. It's not the most efficient or reliable source because, well, first of all, no wind, no power. The other thing is that, well, the carbon footprint of creating some of these wind turbines is greater than the benefit of using them over a fossil fuel. That having been said, it's important that we keep pushing these kinds of technologies because there are some really neat things going on with them that's making them more efficient. We're getting better at storing the energy and we're making them more efficient, easier to build and maintain, which of course makes them a much viable resource. That's kind of what we're going to talk about in the part 2 of the video. But non-renewable resources, those are things like oil, coal, natural gas. Those big three right there, those are those ones that we call fossil fuels. That means they are made from things that were, well, basically, as we talked about, get back in your way back machine, when we were talking about sedimentary rock, we think of like that bituminous coal that was made from layers and layers and layers of that biomass from ancient jungles piling up on each other and slowly decaying down to their base carbon, and that turns into coal, right? And that same process can, well, roughly that same process can also create oil or natural gas, but they come from basically decayed or decomposed living material from millions and millions of years ago. And there's a limited supply of that. And then, of course, nuclear power, while that's a pretty neat thing, and it makes a pretty clean product as far as what it's putting into the atmosphere, there's still a lot of environmental effects that we need to be worried about it. And it's mostly safe, but there are still dangers that go along with it. And of course, it uses a non-renewable resource to make that nuclear reaction happen. So what I'm going to focus on in part 2 of this video, I'm going to hopefully be able to go outside before the rain comes to do this. And if not, then we'll just do it in the garage. I have built a model wind farm. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It is just, I took some old electric motors and, put them on some pieces of wood and hooked up a digital multimeter and some light bulbs and various things. And we're going to create power harnessing the wind. Now, full disclosure, we are not actually being able to use the actual wind to create that power because of the small scale. So we're going to use my leaf blower. So that'll be fun. And my daughter Ryan's going to probably help me out with that video as well. So this is part 1, guys. Hope you are doing well. Be sure to watch part 2 of this video. And again, shoot me some emails, Google messages, Hangouts, whatever. Let me know what kind of other videos you want to see me putting out. If you like this kind of thing, would happy to keep doing more of this. So this is Mr. Hale signing out for part 1. See you shortly for part 2.